Alright, everyone, gather on the campfire. We're gonna tell you a story about the menace, the scourge, ghost crawler of BDO, Johnson. Johnson was once a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed intern. He did all the things that interns do. He got coffee, got drinks, got snacks, did all the actual work that nobody wanted to do, and he saw people using the suggestion box in the Parlibus office. And he thought, you know, I've always wanted to make my own video game. Why don't I put some of these suggestions in there and see how it goes? So he went home and he wrote 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 some more, and he wound up with something about the size of Stephen King's It. A book with roughly, little over 1,100 pages. So he comes back and he starts feeding these into the suggestion box, one after another. It's going so slow that he starts feeding them in chunks. And eventually he hears a crack and some whirring and some smoke. There's a little bit of fire as the shredder that was in the suggestion box just can't keep up. And he pushes all of his suggestions in there, and one survives. So the next few days later, there's a board member who approaches him. They called a meeting about his suggestion that survived the suggestion box, and they're obligated to actually take a look at it. So they call a meeting, there's all the board members there, even the CEO showed up because this is the first suggestion that's ever actually gotten through the box. And Johnson goes off, he's like, Johnson starts off, he's like, you know, I've played this game for approximately 42 minutes, and there's one thing that I just can't stand that we need to change. I can't stand when I go to somebody else's grind spot. They're already there, they've been there for forever, and I just can't kill them for the spot. So instead I try to grief them. I try to kill the rotation, and I just can't kill fast enough. And then they add me to the rotation. There's nothing more frustrating than that. So I propose that we increase the karma loss whenever you fight somebody, whenever you kill somebody. That way griefers like me can live free in this world. So at first nobody really bites on Johnson's idea, but he rolls a d20 in the middle of the table, and it rolls a 20. And slowly, one by one, they come by like, yeah, that makes sense. They're more casuals than PvPers in the game anyway. The CEO's sitting there, he's stroking his beard, he says, you know, Johnson, that's one of the greatest ideas we've ever heard. We're gonna put it in the game. And I'm gonna bump you up to sales, I'm gonna offer you a full-time position. Johnson graciously accepts his position as a full-time sales operator, and he promises to continue to abuse the suggestion box. So he goes home and he writes some more, he brainstorms and he thinks, and it takes a few weeks. But he comes up to it, he's like, you know, what's the problem in BDO right now? Too many people are getting one shot, right? So he puts a suggestion into the box, they call a meeting, everybody's there, everybody's excited because of his last suggestion went over so well. So Johnson gets in there, he's like, you know, I think there's too many people getting one shot. One comboed, one shot, just dying way too quickly. So I propose that we introduce this scoring system to where every gain you get is amplified tenfold. And gaining 3 AP gives you roughly 732 DP and another 47 AP. That way, if you get a small gain, somebody who used to have the same gear as you now is at a major disadvantage. And with a massive gear difference, that'll reduce the amount of people getting one comboed because everybody will have great gear and massive stats. One of the board members goes to pipe up, and as soon as he does, the CEO puts his hand on the table rather loudly, not slamming it, but he puts it down the table rather loudly. He's like, Johnson, I love this idea. It'll really allow our players to have a sense of pride and accomplishment for every piece of gear they gain. We're going to put it in. I'm going to promote you to the head of sales. Promote you to head of sales, but keep up the good suggestions and we'll see if you can go to even higher, even greater heights. Johnson graciously accepts the position and the raise, and he goes back to work. He plays the game for about another 20 minutes, and he realizes, you know, as a griefer who now can't even contest the game because he has no renown score, that he's dying a lot at world bosses. So he puts another suggestion in, and he's like, you know, as somebody who's played the game for probably a total of about 60 minutes in the last year that I've been here, I really think that we should do something about world bosses. Because, you know, my guild has 87 people decked on us because we're a bunch of griefing shitters, and it makes it really hard to do world bosses. So I propose, as opposed to just doing anything to limit the amount of griefing that can happen in the game, we just disable PvP whenever world bosses spawn. The room is silent. Nobody really is biting on his idea. Johnson rolls another d20. It's a 19. Slowly but surely people are coming around to his idea, and if they start brainstorming themselves, they're like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What if we made it so that you couldn't change servers when bosses spawned either, so that you can't go to the PvP channels? What if we made every boss at the same health bar? What if we made bosses despawn after 15 minutes all together? That way you can't fucking kill off in Tet. And everybody's like, yeah! The room is in a fucking uproar now. Everybody's loving his ideas. The CEO throws Johnson a set of keys. He says, Johnson, this is the company car. I want you to take it. It's a Lamborghini. Johnson's basically creams his pants. He's like, thank you so much. I never thought my suggestions would be received so well. So Johnson goes back to work. A few months later, Johnson has another complaint. Puts a suggestion in the box. He goes to put a suggestion in the box, but there's a repairman at the box. The shredder's getting fixed. This doesn't stop Johnson, though, because, as fate would have it, the CEO walks by as Johnson's going to put a suggestion into this newly re-shreddered box. And he's like, Johnson, what are you doing there? He's like, oh, I'm about to put a suggestion into the box. The CEO is like, no, none of that. Come with me. We'll call a meeting right now. Use some of the greatest suggestions in the company. Nothing ever negative. So they call a new meeting. And Johnson's like, well, you see, as somebody who's played this game for a total of 70 minutes by this point over the last year, I really dislike how people who play the game longer than me have more skill. Like, they know better combos, they can do better CC chains, they do some pretty fancy and somewhat disrespectful combos that I just can't keep up with. I propose that because everybody's still getting one-shot, even worse so now after my renown change, that we just change the CC system. Because if nobody knows how the CC system works, nobody can get a combo off, and nobody can one-shot another person. Everybody's like, you know, that makes perfect sense. The CEO stands up, he's like, Johnson, I'm going to offer you a dual position. I'm going to offer you the head of sales and chief game director with a double salary, and you'll get to play golf with me on Sundays. Johnson basically is crying. He's like, yes, I'll do it. I love this place. And he goes off and does his job. Johnson has one final change he wants to make before this year's out. He goes to the CEO and calls a meeting. All the board members come together. The CEO comes down, and they're talking. And Johnson's like, you know, we have a solid community and a solid player base, and then we have a fluctuating player base. In our solid player base, there's a large portion of life skillers and PvEers, and there's a large portion of PvPers. Why don't we just piss off all the PvPers? Let's make it so that with node wars and sieges, some of the most important portions of PvP in the game, that every successful node war, or every successful node war you have, that less PvPers can partake. That way they need to feel a sense of pride, and they really need to absorb the energy of the PvP that they are given and allowed to partake in, and they don't go overboard or some shit like that. Johnson kind of rails off and doesn't know exactly what he's talking about, but everybody the board members are crying. They're like, Johnson, you're the greatest. One of the male board members is like, Johnson, sign my chest. The CEO just slams his fist down. He's like, silence! There's a long pause. He reaches in his pocket, and he pulls out his keys, places them on the table. He slides them across. Johnson, that was the greatest idea I've ever heard in the history of ever. That's probably a better idea than sliced bread and Betty White. I want you... No. He thinks for a second. Takes out another set of keys. He throws him again. He's like, I want you to take this helicopter to my house and fuck my wife. And so Johnson did. And the reign of Johnson was solidified over all of BDO.